Miguel Gavilan Molina is no stranger to being demonized for telling the truth in the most difficult situations. We were just in St. Paul covering the Republican National Police State Convention, and Miguel noticed we saw this long train, and I thought it was just an empty train. And Miguel says, "Look, that train is full of troops." And there were Navy SEALs in the rivers. And there is, we now know, a plan for martial law which was used to intimidate Congresspeople into voting for the bailout, saying that we're going to have people in the streets and we're going to have to put down a rebellion. And they were ready and trained, and there is a plan for martial law. Anyway, Miguel Gavilan Molina.
Thank you, Dennis. Dealing with either military or police violence, or as we call migra, INS violence, is nothing new. I grew up under those conditions. So when I deal with police or the advancement of police, unless we're protecting elders, children, and families, we usually run for cover. We're not going to lay ourselves down and do social disobedience. We're not going to put ourselves laying down on sidewalks to be picked up and taken away, because we know that if I go in, I'm not getting out for 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. Everyone else will get out that day or that night. So the story that I bring here today as a journalist, as a radio programmer, producer, is one that I awakened to about almost 40 years ago, when I realized it was the time when lowriding was coming back into the scene. It was, I guess, late 60s, early 70s. And I got into the pachucada. I got into cruising with the homies and doing the whole thing, cholo and, lovey-dovey. But in the process, I got into it because I got tired of seeing people pulled over, brown profiled, harassed, sometimes beaten. I myself was picked up 11 times and beaten 7. I know what it's like to be bruised, to be cracked ribs, to be hurting, bleeding, and nobody cares until your parents or someone comes to get you out. So I decided real early that I would do something. I also got tired of listening to what I called hee-haw Spanish language radio. Well, it's all jokes, it's all oriented to a commercial, selling. And I said, you know what, we need a voice of our own. We don't need to be analyzed. We don't need to be put into categories and be studied. We don't need someone that's not from our communities looking at us, witnessing us, and then making comment on us and reporting. So at a real early age, I got involved with radio, and we, through a youth student effort, we started an organization called the Bilingual Broadcasting Foundation. And even back then, we had just gotten over the whole Bracero program, thanks to the United Farm Workers and the efforts of Cesar Chavez, who did away with sanctioned slavery of farm workers. And it opened it up. But even then, the immigration was picking up. By the late 70s, early 80s, we saw the whole, anti-Latino sentiment growing in the Simpson-Mazzoli bill. And I got very active against that. And, throughout each decade, it's some revamping of the same issue at the immigrant, and particularly the brown Spanish-speaking communities. So I've been into it, taking radio into our communities. Lately, in the last 3.5, 4 years, we have literally taken the radios that I'm involved with, both Flashpoints and La Onda, into the community. I said, being in the privileged box of Berkeley, our people weren't coming to the station. They weren't coming there. And I realized that my people were coming to Berkeley to clean the university, to cook all the fancy food, to raise the kids of all the rich folks, to take care of the rich folks' parents, their elders. and of course to do the beautiful floral manicure gardens and landscaping. But outside of that, they disappeared. They weren't coming to the station. People were intimidated. So I said, we need to take this out. It's too comfortable here. We're in a box. We're in the safety of the box, and we're not really in touch. So thanks to Dennis and his encouragement, we took the radio on the road. And right into day labor centers, right into peace and justice centers, and sometimes wherever people will let us have a storefront. That's where we do our radio, in the communities. And, we've been under attack a lot for the kind of radical programming we do. And I say, you know what, we might not have the people inside the house supporting what we're doing, but we've got the community. Because everybody involved in each program that I'm with are activists, advocates, organizers. We all come from these movements we cover, which makes us different from other radio personalities. We're not personalities, we're not celebrities, we're not to be stars, we're not to gather attention, we're to give voice and empower our peoples. When 9/11 hit, it gave the Bush regime the pretext to set up a war against immigrant communities, side by side by the war in Iraq. And it gave them the excuse to militarize society and create the beginnings of the police state that we now live in. And let me tell you something. We came back from St. Paul less than, a little over a month ago, and they suspended the Constitution. Military took over police forces and every security force in that city, completely shut down. They closed down the media. They preempted attacks on all independent media. It happened. We were there. We documented it. 3 times we had to evacuate and run for our lives and our safety. And I said to myself, where are we here? Are we in some totalitarian government in China or somewhere? This can't be happening here. It happened here. You didn't see it on the news. They covered it up. But I'll tell you something. One thing that became very, very clear is this country is already militarized. All the weapons, all the new toys they used against the future when they attacked youth. And that's what happened in St. Paul. A deliberate attack against our youth. For myself, it was a shock. Because I hadn't seen white kids get beat up by police since I saw television in Kent State. At the 60s, when police were beating down young hippies, love children, love flowers, all of that. And I remember, and it was shocking to me, because I see it in the barrio. We see it in the hood. We know it happens on the res. Every day, every week. But not like we saw in St. Paul. So the future is coming here. The war in the Middle East, the war in Iraq, reflects the war against the immigrant communities in this country. The war in Palestine, the war in Afghanistan, is a systematic war of genocide, which is happening to the reservations and Native American communities in this country. The only thing they're not doing is shooting rockets and coming in with tanks and bombing those communities. But not yet, that's right. But the Black Hawk helicopters are always there. They're always on the perimeters. We've seen them, we know. So I'm just saying that after this election, we all have to prepare ourselves. Because the empire of the eagle has crashed. The whole world knows that. But because they control media, we can't see it. We still believe in the American dream. We're still hoping that this government is going to save this country. Obama, whether it's Obama or John Wayne, McCain, it's not the answer. They're all military, presidential candidates. And we have to not only stop the war, we have to stop the ROTCs going into our high schools and going into junior colleges and recruiting for the military. This government, both the Demo-Publicans, have already taxed the future of our youth for the next 30, 40 years. Most of us will be dead. We're not going to be paying off this debt. It's going to be our children. And I'll tell you something. People say, well, what is the bailout going to do to your community? I said, well, my community is mostly poor. We've been poor all along. We know how to scratch. We know how to grow corn, squash, papas, frijoles. We will survive. We've been poor all along. Most of us don't own homes. We don't have credit lines. We're invisible, yet we're a mass majority. We will endure. What I say is the rest that doesn't know what it's like to go hungry for 2 or 3 days. I grew up going hungry so that my younger siblings could have that extra seconds that they wanted. I know what hunger is. I know farm workers. I grew up as a farm worker. I lived in a chicken coop till I was 12 years old in Sonoma County, one of the richest counties in this country, and still is. And every night during grape season, 12, 1, 2 in the morning, they have giant stadium lights. And they have farm workers out there picking the exquisite wine grapes so that the fancy class in this country can drink their wine at 30, 40, 50, 60 dollars a bottle and can't even pay a decent wage to the workers. I'm just going to end this saying very simply that borders are instruments of dominant groups, of powerful economic groups, of capital, not labor. They are functional to the system as mechanisms of transnational control. You know what? In Indian land, there are no borders. Borders were brought to separate. And I'll tell you something, you all, if this was anywhere else on earth, there would be riots in the street for what just happened with the bailout. Can you believe it? We should be outraged. How can we as hard-working taxpayers who barely make livings, be paying the bailout of the rich corporations that got themselves in the mess? There's no outrage. That's why when we get real candidates like Sydney, we need to support her. She's a breath of fresh air because honesty and truth are endangered languages and morals in this country. Thank you.